Great. Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for being here and having me, and also thanks to Sire for this amazing presentation. I really appreciate it. Okay, so as you heard, my name is Stuart Browne, and I'm the CEO of a venture capital firm called Pycap. But Pycap is also an incubator that's registered with the federal government of Canada for the Startup Visa program. And actually, I have a few of my incubator members in the audience. So those of you who are affiliated with Pycap, let's please meet after the event or at some point during the networking session so we can get a photo together. Okay, so my presentation is about how venture capital firms invest. And I want to just do a quick poll of the audience before I get started. Who here is an entrepreneur? Okay, great. And among the entrepreneurs, who here has received funding from a venture capitalist before? Okay, great. And who here would like to receive funding from a venture capitalist? Okay, so we've all come to the right place for this presentation. So, in my whole journey in the world of venture capital for the last 10 or so years, I've met a ton of entrepreneurs, I've advised many, and I've noticed that achieving venture capital funding is often the aspiration of many entrepreneurs when they get started. But even though VC funding is such a large focus and driving point of how you develop your business, I've noticed that often entrepreneurs don't fully grasp or understand what a venture capital fund is or how VCs invest. And to be honest, you'd be forgiven for that because in the world of venture capital, it's often seen as us investors operating behind a veil, meaning we don't really disclose a lot of what we do unless we have a big success story. So you don't really understand possibly. There could be an asymmetry of information when you're pitching a VC. So it makes it a little bit more challenging to successfully close a round because in any sort of transaction, in order to come to an agreement, it's important for you to understand who the person is on the other side of the negotiation table and try to find out what their motivation is. Okay, so let's carry on how VCs invest. So firstly, I keep hearing this beep. Does anyone hear a beeping noise right now? Is there any way to stop the beeping noise? Okay, awesome, thanks. Okay, so what is a venture capital fund? Well, what's a fund? I'm sure you've all heard of a mutual fund or an ETF, an exchange-traded fund, or possibly a hedge fund. But what actually is a fund? So a fund is an investment pool. So it's this pool of capital that investors put money into, and then there's a fund manager who manages the pool of capital. And that fund manager takes the capital and invests it into deals. We call them deal flow or deals. That's basically just the companies that we're looking to invest in. And then this pool ends up owning equity in each of the companies, and the investors, who we call LPs or limited partners who put money into the fund, they own what's called units of the fund, which represents ownership in equity of all of the companies that the fund invests into. So venture capitalists are unique among other type of fund managers. The things that make VCs quite unique fundamentally is that venture capitalists get heavily involved in the management of the companies which they invest in. They also target early stage companies, and they often target early stage companies that are in the tech industry, particularly software. So when you understand finance and investing, there's two pillars that you need to be cognizant of. It's the two fundamentals of finance, the two fundamentals of investing. And if you've spent enough time in the world of finance, you almost kind of look at life in regards to these two fundamental pillars. Each pillar starts with an R. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? What are the two R's that I'm talking about in the world of finance? Risk and return, that's right. So how does risk and return play into the selection process that a VC operates within in order to make an investment decision? So we already established that venture capitalists usually invest in early stage companies. We've established that within the early stage companies that VCs deploy capital into, it's predominantly in the tech industry, or even more specifically, mostly in software. How does that relate to risk and return? Like, why is it that VCs prefer to invest in software companies predominantly? Well, it's because software companies have less capital requirements up front in order to scale their business or grow their business. And because VCs are investing in early stage companies, given the fact that they are early stage, they are high risk. Why is an early stage company so much more risky than a later stage company? Can anyone help me understand?
There is no proof of concept yet.
That's right, there's no proof of concept, there's no data, there's no history. The best indicator of a future result is looking at what happened historically. So if you invest in a company that's publicly traded, or a private equity firm that is a later stage manufacturing company, restaurant, whatever, you can extrapolate the data of the history of that company in operation to try to predict what might happen in the future. Finance investing is all about future potential. And so if you're able to look at the data from the history, like if it's a later stage company, you get to have all of this evidence and all of these indicators to show you that maybe there's a good chance that this company will continue to be successful and continue to grow and continue and hopefully provide you with a high return or a return. But when you don't have the history, when you don't have the data, when your company is starting out and creating a product that the world's never seen before, it's risky because you don't know if that product or that company is going to be successful. And within finance and investing, in order to justify investing in a very risky company, why is it so challenging for me to get financed by a VC? Well, every time you speak to a VC, they're going to be looking at you through the lens of risk and return. And we established that history, traction, that sort of thing is a factor that contributes to the risk of your company being extremely high. So you might say to yourself, okay, well, I'm just starting out. Like, this is a chicken and egg scenario. How can I build traction, build revenue, build data and history to prove to a VC that my company, my business model, my idea is not as risky as they think? Because I need the money in order to do that. Well, there's other ways around that you could show that you're building traction, improving your business model, other than just generating revenue, which we'll get into. But when a VC is evaluating an investment opportunity and you're pitching the VC, you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to talk about how this company is going to be worth $1 billion, and I'm going to be talking about how great my idea is and how I'm helping the world. All of that stuff is great, but again, if you're not hitting on these three elements, then they're not going to invest in your company. So what are the three elements? Can your business survive in the short term? Number one. Number two, can it grow exponentially in the medium term? And then number three, even if you have number one and number two sorted out, you're growing your business, you're killing it. If you don't have number three, the VC is not doing their job. And that is, is there an exit opportunity? So you heard that I'm on the investment committee of an Ontario government-backed fund that has about $350 million in assets under management. And there's actually an entrepreneur in the room who was pitching me while I was on this panel, I think about a month ago. And so we received a number of pitches. I'm not singling this entrepreneur out, but after the entrepreneurs left the room, the CEO and the CFO of this government fund went around the room to the investment committee members and asked us what we thought of the deal. And then they got to me. And I said, okay, well, these companies seem great, but let's look at the term sheet that they're putting in front of us. Like, what are they offering exactly? They want us to invest in this thing called a SAFE, a simple agreement for future equity. So they want us to give money to this entrepreneur so we can potentially have that piece of paper convert into equity or shares in the business at some point when there's a triggering event. And the triggering event would be the company's next financing round, next equity financing round that we're looking to invest in. And then this pool ends up owning equity in each of the companies, and the investors, who we call LPs or limited partners who put money into the fund, they own what's called units of the fund, which represents ownership in equity of all of the companies that the fund invests into. So venture capitalists are unique in regards to these two fundamental pillars. Each pillar starts with an R. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? What are the two R's that I'm talking about in the world of finance? Risk and return, that's right. So how does risk and return play into the selection process that a VC operates within in order to make an investment decision? So we already established that venture capitalists usually invest in early stage companies. We've established